Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of Quran for Ramadan. The passage that we are going to study today, in fact, is a single verse from Surah Al-Baqarah. This is verse 177. It reads, لَيْسَ الْبِرَّ أَن تُوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ قِبَلَ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ وَلَكِنَّ الْبِرَّ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَالْمَلَائِكَةِ وَالْكِتَابِ وَالنَّبِيِّينَ وَآتَى الْمَالَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ ذوي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل والسائلين وفي الرقاب أقام الصلاة وآتى الزكاة والموفون بعهدهم إذا عاهدوا والصابرين في البأساء والضراء وحين البأس أولئك الذين صدقوا وأولئك هم المتقون. They think that the duty imposed on them of being loyal to God is fulfilled by merely observing certain rites and rituals. They should know that loyalty to God does not merely mean that you face the east or the west in the prayer, but loyalty is the loyalty of those who believe in God with all their heart and in the last day and in the angels of God and in His books and in His prophets, and who, in spite of their love for wealth, spend it on kinsfolk, the orphans, the destitute, the traveler, and on those who ask and for the liberation of necks, and who are diligent in their prayer and pay zakah. And loyalty is the loyalty of those who, when make a promise, fulfill it, and especially of those who are steadfast in scarcity, illness, and in times of war. These are the people who are truthful to God in fulfilling the promise of loyalty to Him, and these are the ones who are in fact God conscious. So this is a very, very comprehensive passage of the Quran, and it is in fact one of those passages which covers a lot of directives of religion, and encompassing not only the worship rituals but also rituals which relate to one another's well-being, and more so they are the way that you should behave with other people, and at the same time be diligent in all your commitments. So let's start off with what has been said earlier on, and before we do that, there is a small background to this verse, and that is that in Surah Baqarah there is this charge sheet that has been presented against the Israelites, which are the Jews and the Christians, and they used to have this dispute among them to face the east or the west regarding praying. So their Qibla was divided into east and west, and this debate took a very ugly shape, and the result was that all of their religious undertakings depended on these outward forms and the display of following these outward forms, and they sacrificed the essence of religion, or the spirit of religion. So it is in this background that when the believers or the last messengers ummah was instituted, they are now being warned and admonished that they should not follow the path of their predecessors. And in this regard, if they have to express loyalty towards God, then it is not merely by that outward display, but it has something very deep within it. The word bir has a very comprehensive meaning in Arabic, and the best possible equivalent in the English language is loyalty, sincerity, and one's loyalty with God. So this is what is mentioned here in this passage, that what exactly does loyalty to God mean? The first thing which is actually mentioned is in fact a list in which all the beliefs are mentioned one after the other, starting off with the fact that true loyalty is one, or a person who is truly loyal to the Almighty is one who first of all who first of all believes in God with all his heart and all his soul. And not only that, he has belief in the hereafter, in angels, in the book of God, and in all the prophets of God. So this is like a comprehensive statement of expressing one's belief. And the more you express this statement, the more you come to know how all-embracing religion is. So it's not just in the book of God that you have to believe in, referring to the fact that this book is something which is your own book, but all the books of God. The word Al-Kitab, although is mentioned in the singular here, it actually is like a generic noun which covers all the books of God. And Nabiyyin, of course, is a plural of Nabi, which means all prophets of God. So all prophets of God, all the books of God, they have to be believed in together with belief in God in the hereafter. And it is here that we need to understand from elsewhere in the Quran that whether it's belief in God is concerned, whether it's the veracity of the scriptures, especially the last scripture is concerned, whether it's the belief in the last prophet is concerned, and all the prophets are concerned. This is something which has been laid down in the Quran in a very comprehensive way, And it's not something of an imposition or something of a claim that the Quran makes. It is basically backed by arguments and reasoning. So if you have to believe in God, it's not just a directive that you have to believe in, but it's basically a directive regarding which you will have arguments and reasons that will convince you that yes, this belief is something which is logical and this is something that we can go along with. Similar is the case with the hereafter and all unseen things. So it's not that we are being asked to blindly follow something, but the fact is that all these articles of faith, they have sound reasoning behind them. And the rest of the Quran, as you can see here, it is stated very concisely. But if you look at the rest of the Quran, you'll find that all these arguments in favor of these beliefs are mentioned in various surahs. One important thing that I'd like to point out here is that belief in the previous books of God is something which is often ignored or overlooked. I mean, by overlooking, I actually mean that when you believe in the previous books of God, it's not just by name that you say that you believe in the Torah or the Injil or the Psalms. It is actually a belief in which you go through these books. For unless you are able to read these books or you go through these books, your belief will just be a non-introductory belief. It would be more of a blind belief. So believing in the books of God actually requires that we also try to read those books of God, which unfortunately have been regarded as redundant by many people who profess faith. So of course the Quran is something that has to be read. But other than that, if you have to profess faith in the books of God, then that can only be an understood reality if you are able to go through these books. And if you go through these books, you'll find out that a very major portion of these books is still in line with what the Quran is teaching. Yes, there are discrepancies, at times there are alterations, there are changes, but by and large, a very large proportion of these books is still intact. Yes, we don't have them in their original language, but what we have are translations, and these translations, if you compare them with the Quran, you'll find out how close they are to the Quran and how at times impactful they are when you read them, especially if you're able to read the Psalms or passages from the New Testament, especially the Red Letter Bible, if you have an introduction to that, which is basically a Bible that has been published with Jesus' words in red so that you can know the divine content as far as possible. You'll get to know how close it is to the Quran. The next thing which is mentioned is وَآتِ الْمَالَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ ذَوِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينَ وَابْنَ السَّبِيلِ. So a very important element which relates us to the rest of our brethren is now mentioned here, and that is that these loyal people, they are those who, in spite of their want for wealth, which means آتِ الْمَالَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ, in spite of the fact that they have a love for wealth, they are attracted to wealth, they have a need for this, but in spite of that, they still spend this wealth for the cause of other people. And it starts off with the nearest to the next nearest. And therefore, the first thing or the first head which is mentioned is Zawil Qurba, which are your blood relatives, your kinsfolk. Such importance they have that the Quran, more often than not, if you look at various passages, mentions them the foremost. And these foremost are the ones who you would realize are very close to you. They might be living right under your nose. They might be your close relatives. And often, at times, we overlook them. So the Quran says, no, the first right of your charity is your kinsfolk. And this includes your parents as well. People generally think that you cannot spend in charity regarding your parents. This is not what the Quran has said. And on several occasions it says, وَمَا أَنفَقْتُم مِّنْ خَيْرٍ فَلِلْوَالِدَيْنِ وَالْأَقْرَبِينَ. So whatever you spend in charity, it is for your parents, for your kinsfolk, which means that to be charitable to your parents, and if you have money for charity, it's not something of any way, it's not a degrading thing that you spend on your own kinsfolk in any way. It's not a poor fund as is generally understood. It's a fund in which you cater for the needs even of your parents. And as the list goes on, the orphans, of course, occupy a very, very special status in our society. They are the weak people of our society. They are the weak section of our society. And the Quran has special stress to be made in this regard, that you must support these orphans as much as you can. And the masakeen, of course, the poor people who are around you. And here, the important thing that we need to understand is that these professional beggars that we normally find around ourselves are not what is implied here by the Quran. Miskeen is a person who, of course, is afflicted with poverty, and more often than not, he or she would not come to you for his or her needs. it is we who have to reach out to them. They would rather sleep empty stomach than come and beg for any need. So such is their self-respect and self-esteem that they would not ask. It is we who have to look out for them. We have to switch on our antennas to spot such people, and it's not very difficult to spot such people if we have this tuning and this frequency in which we are able to see beyond the apparent. Because you see, apparently a person might seem to be very well placed in life, but if you look a little beyond that sparkling face, you may find a person who is in want. So this is where believers have to really tune their eyes and ears to. And then, of course, Wabn Sabil, which is the wayfarer or the traveler. In the times of the Prophet and in the times of the Quran, travelers were really, they had their own plight and they needed to be looked after. It's not that the travelers of today, of course, are entirely different. In those times, people would be left at the mercy of the new city that they would be traveling, and there were no hotels or motels that they are today. So they would typically be staying with someone who would host them, and as such, they would be in need. And finally, it is said, وَالسَّائِلِينَ وَفِي الرِّقَابِ, that people who ask, and of course those for the liberation of neck. So in contrast to the miskeen who would not ask, these sa'ilin are the people who would come to you. So of course there are always two categories of people. One category, as I said, has a lot of self-respect and self-esteem, and that category, or people of that category, would not come forth and would not come forward and ask for any such thing. But there is another category of people who, when they come to you, they would of course express their needs, and they need to be evaluated and vetted, and therefore if anything can be done for them, it should be done for them. And fir riqab, of course, is for the liberation of necks. We have discussed this earlier as well. In the times of the Prophet, slavery was rampant, but the Quran made an appeal in the very beginning, fakku raqaba, liberate the necks, which is like a very strong appeal to our emotions, or the people of those times that were addressed, and they were told that you have, it's like put fetters and shackles around the necks of these people, so just release them and emancipate them. So charity can also be spent for this purpose, as was the case in those times. But today we don't have any slavery of this sort, so that money or that head can be used for the bails of those prisoners who might not be having the money to be bailed, and they are at times innocent, or they just need that money to be bailed out from the prison. Next comes the mention of very two important worship rituals. One of them is Salah and the other them is Zakat. So the words are وَأَقَامَ الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَ الزَّكَاةَ. They are the ones who adhere to the prayer and they diligently pay Zakat. وَالْمُوفُونَ بِعَهْدِهِمْ إِذَا أَعْهَدُوا. They are the ones who, when make a promise, they honor that promise. So either they don't make a promise, the stress here is that either they would not make a promise, but if they would do, then they would go to the last extent to honor what they have given their word. So this is something that we also need to pay heed to, because at times we are slack in our commitments, and right at the time that we might be making a commitment, we know that we might not be able to honor it, but we still go forth and make that commitment. So it is here that we need to learn to say no. Commitments that we cannot honor should be said no to at the very start, because this is something which is very essential. Otherwise we will become popular as irresponsible people, which of course is something of a very unbecoming nature. The Quran then says, وَالصَّابِرِينَ فِي الْبَأْسَاءِ وَالضَّرَّاءِ وَحِينَ الْبَأْسِ. That these are the people who are steadfast in scarcity and illness and in times of war. So if you reflect, you'll find that these are three very major tribulations that a person can face in a war-stricken region where there is war rampant. You can imagine how people would be badly struck, and they would be facing so many tribulations and difficulties. Similarly, in scarcity, which means that when resources are scarce, again, this is a test of our patience. And as the Quran says, in affairs of our illness, whenever we are ill or sick, that too is a big test for us. So the Quran says that these loyal people are such that they adhere to their promise of loyalty even in such very testing situations. And the Quranic word is sabirin. So remember, the word sabr in Arabic actually means steadfast. It's not something of a weakness that is generally thought of, but the word in Arabic, the word sabr in Arabic actually means a person who stares that challenge in the eye, who is steadfast, who actually comes to grips with that challenge that faces him. And then the Quran has very graciously said, Ulaika allazina sadaku wa ulaika humul muttaqun, that these are the people who are in fact, these are the people who are truthful to God. Ulaika allazina sadaku wa ulaika humul muttaqun, and these are the ones who are in fact muttaqi or God conscious. So by enumerating this list, the purpose of the Quran is to tell us that these are the people who are in fact truthful to their promise of loyalty. They are really sincere to the Almighty, and at the same time they are the ones who are God conscious. The word taqwa or piety, we have discussed this earlier as well, it actually means to abide by the limits which are prescribed by the Almighty regarding His religion. So He has prescribed laws, He has prescribed regulations. So to abide by those regulations and to stay within the limits is what we call as taqwa. And precisely this is what the Quran has said here, that وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُتَّقُونَ, that people who follow what has been just said, they are the ones who are really God conscious. So with this we come to an end to today's discussion, and we now open our forum for the Q&A.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
सर मैंने पूछना था, कल जो आपने एक्सप्लेन किया था उसमें आपने कहा था कि लग़व बात अगर कहीं हो रही हो तो वहां से चले जाओ, और लग़व आपने अंग्रेजी में तर्जुमा किया था फ्रिवलस। अब फ्रिवलस चीजें तो मतलब फॉर एग्जांपल अगर 3 लोग बैठ के कैरम बोर्ड खेल रहे हैं और आप वहां चले जाएं और आप कहें कि जी मैं चौथा बंदा हूं, मैं भी ज्वाइन कर लेता हूँ, तो इसमें क्या मसला है?
इसमें तो कोई मसला नहीं है। फ्रिवलस चीज़ें तो वो होती हैं जिसको हमने कहा तो यूज, ये तो एंटरटेनमेंट है ना। फ्रिवलिटी इज़ नॉट, आई मीन इट्स नॉट अगेंस्ट एंटरटेनमेंट। एंटरटेनमेंट तो बिल्कुल एक अलग चीज़ है, अम्यूजमेंट बिल्कुल अलग चीज़ है। तो लव का मतलब है यूजलेस, मतलब जैसे एक आदमी है गालम गलोच हैं, आप कभी बैठ के देखें कि लोग गालम गलोच के अंदर या जुगतों के अंदर या बहुत सारी ऐसी चीज़ें कि जिसमें आपको मालूम है कि भाई ये एक बिल्कुल बेतुका काम है। तो ये असल में कुरान का जो मसबा नज़र है वो तो लग़वियात पे है। लग़वियात का जो इतलाक़ है वो एंटरटेनमेंट पे नहीं होता।
तो फिर लव काम,
लव देखें इसका सही मतलब है यूजलेस चीज़ें। अब आप यूजलेस चीज़ों की लिस्ट बना सकते हैं। मैंने आपको एक मिसाल दे दी कि आप बहुत दफ़ा बैठ के बिल्कुल एक यूजलेस तरीके से गुफ्तगू कर रहे होते हैं, एंड उसमें आपका मकसद असल में या तो किसी को डिस्पैरेज करना होता है या किसी पर जुमला कसना होता है, किसी का दिल दुखाना होता है, या एट द सेम टाइम आप गालम गलोच में इन्वॉल्व हो जाते हैं। यानी इस तरह की जो चीज़ें होती हैं जिसके बारे में हर इंसान ये महसूस करता है कि यार दीज आर अनबिकमिंग है ये। तो ये बेसिकली अनबिकमिंग चीज़ें हैं।
So thank you. You said that we should try to reach out people who are in need, but if I remember correctly, elsewhere in the Quran, it's also said that we should also give to the people who become desperate and come to your door. So how are we going to differentiate between that and also that it is generally a common notion that we should not count before giving to somebody else. Allah will be counting before giving His blessings to you.
So I think these are two categories of people which are also mentioned in the passage that we have just discussed. So the word miskeen and the word Saleem. So the word Saleem actually means people who ask, who come to you. So in other words, the Quran has accepted, I mean it's acknowledged that there are two categories of people. One who would not come to you but they are in need, and others who would come to you. So I mean we, of course, people who do not come to us, it is for us to judge them. As I said, if you look beyond them, beyond the apparent, if you have the knack to look beyond the apparent, it is not difficult to spot people once you start tuning yourself. And as for people who come to you, obviously this is something that is at times a challenge as well, because you don't know whether the person is genuine or not. So I mean at times it's an on the spot decision that you take, and I mean you just trust your gut feeling. And at other times when maybe the need is large, you need to vet that person, you need to evaluate whether he is really genuine or she's really genuine or not. So that is like, I mean, evaluating and finding out the reality. So if you're able to do that, then this is something which is much better than just throwing away money.
Thank you. So the follow-up question for me is that what if we have like we see beggars on the streets like literally everywhere, and I mean they are like, people give them money, but should we give them, because they are desperate. I mean they're trying to protect, like, so what about them?
So I think this is again I mean difficult situation. It's like you have to trust your gut feeling, because at times when you look at someone, especially if they're old people who come to you, So it's difficult to restrain at that time, and you might give some money. Others who are younger and they look physically fine, so maybe you can just politely tell them that why don't you look for some work, or maybe you suggest something to them. Or, I mean, as I said, at times you feel that, well, yes, I should give that person. So you trust your gut feeling. It's like, it's difficult at times. But as I said, when the amount is large or substantial and someone comes to you for that need, then I think it is better to have that whole case investigated, because I mean, you can easily find out through some investigation whether that need is genuine or not. But other than that, there are of course some on the spot decisions that we do take. Sometimes they are correct, and sometimes ultimately they might not be correct. But I think because our intention is always to help people, as far as our reward is concerned, that should be I mean, safe with the Almighty. But whether it's going to have that requisite effect is something, of course, which will depend on the genuine nature of the case, if it is there.
So my question was, when a lady is pregnant and also after her pregnancy, when she has child, so during that time she is unable to keep her fast for the full month. So
Right.
when she also has a child, so child is really young, like 1 year, 2 year. In that time also, because the baby, she needs to feed the baby. So at that time also she doesn't fast. So for that, after like later she has to fast like 3 years of sorry,
Right.
3 years
Yes.
fast, like 3 months she has to fast. So is there any compensation for that? Like
Well,
or she has to
personally, yeah, I'm in no position to compensate. In any case, what I can say is that the Almighty wants women to keep their fast, which they have missed. And I mean, if they just maybe make a habit of keeping 1 or 2 or 3 every month later on, whenever they have, I mean, whenever they are healthy and they have passed through their pregnancy and childbearing age, this is something which is something that they need to do. And not only in that case, but whenever they are passing through the cycles also, of course, women are not required to fast, but that too has to be made up. So you see, you need to understand this, or we need to understand this, that basically God wants women to partake those blessings of the fast as well, which they miss. So it's not like a penalty when they have to make up for their fast. It's like, once again, trying to access those blessings that they have lost. So if you change the angle in which you view missed fasts, you'll immediately relish keeping those missed fasts. If you view them as a penalty or something of a burden, it'll become difficult. But if you view them as a fact that, well, these are blessings that I had lost because of a certain situation, and now I need to regain them. So then you will make a plan, and instead of letting them linger on and the count increasing, you will try to keep them in small bits and portions in over various months and various periods of the year.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Rohan, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Thank you. I've watched some videos of scholars of Al-Mawrid, and I understand that they're of the view that you cannot recite a surah and transfer the sawab to someone who has passed away. But I had this confusion. Someone told me that yes, this is true, but if you give charity from someone else, I mean, with the intention that the sawab of the charity gets transferred to another person, then that is possible. I just wanted to confirm.
You see, the principle in this regard has been spelled out by the Quran. It says, "Laysa lil insani illa ma sa'a." A person will only get for what he or she made an effort or started or initiated that thing. So whether it's charity, whether it's any other thing, if the person who in his living, when he was living or she was living, he or she had that intention that she would do that, and the heirs of that person are going to complete it, then yes, she will get a reward or he will get a reward. But if the intention was not there and was never communicated, and the heirs they think that on her behalf we are doing something good, it is here that they have to realize that they might be doing something good, but then it is for their own selves. Having said that, one important thing that might also be noted here is that any good thing that you do on behalf of a deceased, in which that deceased has had a role in your instruction and training, maybe your teacher, maybe your relative, maybe your parents, they taught you something good, and you learned that good deed from them, and then you practiced it. So every time you practice it, they will also be rewarded because they had a role in educating you, in instructing you, and in training you. So whether they are your parents, whether they are your teachers, or anyone else. So that is a category that we often miss. So remember, any good that you have learned from any person who has passed away, whenever you practice that good, you will get the reward yourself, but that person will also be rewarded because he initiated that thing in you. And every time you do it, it's like he getting that reward as well.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad.
Right.
Baran,
Thank you.
please ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum assalam.
Sir, my question is about, for example, in this ayat, Allah says that we have to give our family first, or our kin first. But what if you have limited contact with your family, or they live really far away in different countries? Like, what is then, how are we supposed to uphold the ties of kinship if there's like some drama between the family members?
Well, these are exceptional situations. I mean, normal situations, of course, your family is connected to you and you're able to spend for your family. But in certain exceptional situations, when you are cut off, either because of distance or because of strained relations, so these are exceptional cases. And even in such cases, if you are able to support your family in any way, in a remote way, by sending any funds that you might be able to, so that is something that we should think of. However, if the circumstances are such that there is absolute cut-off, or maybe you don't know where they are, which is quite rare, and as I said, it's an exception, then that is a different scenario.
Please, Dr. Shehzad, if you can just generally help me. I find these days my husband is very sick. So when I'm saying my prayers, I find I just totally get distracted. You know, I am saying I'm in sajda and all, and I suddenly, it comes to my mind, oh, did he take his medicine? Oh no, what's the time? Oh no, he should have been given this. So I really, really want to get over this because it's a serious illness. So is there any way I can concentrate that, okay, this is my namaz, I must concentrate on this and forget the whole.
Right. I think this is a constant challenge that all of us face in some form or the other. And there is no solution to it except that it's a battle that we have to fight, try to concentrate as much as we can. And whenever we lose concentration, we come back and try to make amends. So this is like a self-effort. There is no way out except to face these challenges in life. Every person is faced with various challenges. Some relate to sickness, other relates to poverty, still others to war, as this verse has also said. So these are challenges which all people face in various circumstances. So we have to make the best out of them. There is no easy solution. It's a battle that all of us need to fight and try as much as we can.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Salman, please ask your question now.
So, Jazakallah. Sir, I wanted to ask this question a couple of days back. This was regarding Surah Furqan and the issue of forgiveness without any restrictions. Sir. So you might be familiar with that hadith about Washi, who unfortunately martyred the uncle of the Prophet. Later on, when after the Fatah of Makkah, he came to the Prophet ﷺ, he said that, okay, I forgive you, but don't show me your face again. So keeping this hadith in mind, I'm not sure about its authenticity. Could you please guide what should be our actions?
Well, I am also not sure of the authenticity. I've heard this, and I think that a lot of things that go on in history might not necessarily be the way they are reported. So the Prophet that I would know of would perhaps not say these words. I think they might have been wrongly reported, or there might be some other context. So, I mean, forgiveness and wholehearted forgiveness is what we would have expected from the Prophet, and I truly believe that this is what he must have done. And maybe the narrators have mixed it up, or maybe there are some other details which are missing. So always remember that in history, things when they are reported, they have an impact on the people who report it. At times, the person who is reporting it is missing some very, very significant details. At other times, people who come after him to hear out what he has said, they add or they subtract significant details. But in the light of the fact that the Quran has called the Prophet to be an embodiment of high character, I find it very unbecoming, or maybe I think there must have been something else which they have mixed up. I wouldn't say that the Prophet wouldn't have forgiven him. Yes, it was a very heinous crime that he committed, because of course, he did something which is so heinous and so horrific. But at the same time, we know that our Rahmatul Alameen is the title of our Prophet, and I'm pretty sure that he must have forgiven him wholeheartedly.
I just wanted to add a point to the prayer and the problem for concentrating in the prayer. So I used to struggle with this a lot, and one technique that my mother suggested to me was being mindful while praying and focusing on the meaning of the Arabic that we are reciting, instead of just reciting it and moving forward. So I think this is a very main point and a very significant thing as well, that you are mindful while you're reciting the prayers.
Correct, absolutely correct, Manahil, you are spot on. This goes without saying that reciting something without understanding it is something which is peculiar only to Muslims when they recite the Quran or their prayer. Otherwise, there is nowhere in the world, in no place in the world, do you read anything without understanding. I mean, this is simply out of question. This is very unfortunate that we are able to read the Quran without understanding it. So yes, your mother was absolutely right, that if you focus on the meanings of what you are reciting in the prayer, there's still a chance that you might, I mean, your concentration might wander, but still there is a very high chance that you will still remain focused.
डॉक्टर शहजाद, मैं आपसे पूछना चाह रहा हूँ कि हराम है हमारा ये जो इंटरेस्ट देना है, बैंक्स जो देते हैं, तो somebody was saying कि जी हम इंटरेस्ट ले रहे हैं and we are going to give charity for जो भी इंटरेस्ट आता है इस बैंक से हमें, तो आपका क्या, what is your view about this particular thing, you know?
तो देखें, अल्लाह ताला तो ये चाहते हैं कि पाकीज़ा माल है जो उनकी राह में दिया जाए, पाकीज़ा चीज़ें ही अल्लाह ताला एक्सेप्ट करते हैं। लेकिन अगर आपका सेविंग्स अकाउंट है और आपके पास कोई ऑप्शन ही नहीं है, ज़ाहिर हो पैसे तो आपके अकाउंट में आएंगे, अव्वल तो कोशिश करेंगे करंट अकाउंट हो, अगर नहीं और सेविंग्स अकाउंट ही है जिसमें लाजमन पैसे आएंगे, तो इसके सिवा और कोई हल नहीं है कि वो बस आप सोसाइटी को लौटा दें और ये तवक्को करेंगे इसका आपको शायद अजर तो नहीं मिलेगा, क्योंकि अजर उस चीज़ का मिलता है जो आपकी हो। ये वैसे ही सोसाइटी का हक था जो आपने उसको लौटा दिया। तो अजर की तवक्को किए बगैर यही करना चाहिए कि वो जो आपके पास सूद आ रहा है वो आप अल्लाह की राह में दे दें।
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
Sir, I can't understand or differentiate between the meaning of basa'i, wazarra'i, al-basi. What is, yes, wahin al-basi. So, hina means time. But what is the difference between these three words, basa'i, zarra'i, and al-basi?
So, basa means scarcity, when you are facing shortage of funds. When you are facing shortage of funds, that is a basa.
The first word basa.
Yes, that is the meaning of the first word. Zarra means when you are ill or sick. And heen al-ba's means at the time of war. So the word heen means time and ba's means war. So at the time of war. Yes, heen al-ba's means at the, yes, the word heen means at the time and ba's means war. So heen al-ba's means at the time of war.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. There was a question Musa Haroon asked, and it was that, what ayah were you referring to when you said that the person who is deceased will get the benefit of the thing initiated by him like charity? So what was the ayah of the Quran that you were referring to?
Laysa lil insani illa ma sa'a. This is a verse of Surah Najm, which is the 53rd surah of the Quran. You'll find it somewhere in between, near the end of that surah. Laysa lil insani illa ma sa'a, which means a person will get in the hereafter only for which he had striven in this world.
Thank you. And just the last question from Bilal is that, what is the difference between profit and interest?
Well, there's a world of difference. Profit is the amount that you get in selling your commodity in the market. And interest, of course, is a transaction of loan. You lend an amount, and the amount that you get over and above that lent amount is called interest. It's a very common word. I mean, there's no anything religious attached to it. These are very common words, and they have their same meaning as they have in our dictionaries. There's nothing special which Islam has added to them.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad.